Pakistan has got to be broken into pieces. Baluchistan is a key part of that. And the goal has got nothing to do with the dignity of these various ethnic groups, everything to do with creating a chaos and civil war so that no pipeline from Iran into China can go across Pakistani territory. And that is the Jundullah card that the CIA is playing under Obama. At the time of the revolution, everybody said, well, at least Obama is not verbally interfering in Iranian affairs. And this, of course, it means absolutely nothing. The U.S. government is intervening. They are de facto at war with Iran below the threshold of conventional forces. In other words, it's an irregular war. It's a guerrilla war plus political subversion that's being fomented against Iran, and Obama's up to his neck in it. Obama's demagogy in the election campaign was to say Iraq is the bad war, Bush's war, Afghanistan is the good war, the 9/11 justified war, and therefore Obama would escalate that. So he's delivering what he said. It's interesting that the left liberals, the people who were most upset about Iraq and Afghanistan, were simply incapable of hearing what Obama said repeatedly. He demanded the escalation of Afghanistan and unilateral attacks on Pakistani territory to pursue, quote, terrorists. Now, the real purpose of going into Afghanistan is chaos and confusion in the region. Drive the Taliban out of Afghanistan and into Pakistan, where they can wage war, civil war, against the central government in Islamabad. And this has largely happened. The Swat Valley and South Waziristan are two areas where this has happened. And they forced the conventional Pakistani army to take up what amounts to a civil war against the Taliban there. This mainly means the Pushtun people, since that is what most of the Taliban are. But it also then extends the fact that Pashtunistan, Baluchistan, and other Afghan regions also spill over into Pakistan and Iran. Now, General McChrystal is a practitioner of torture. He is a guy who set up torture chambers and torture stations across Iraq. He's probably the guy who invented Al-Qaeda in Iraq. It was an absolute propaganda necessity for the U.S. that Al-Qaeda be present in Iraq. And it looks like he organized this character Zarqawi, a well-known patsy, to come out of his Ansar-protected enclave where the U.S. was shielding him and pledge fealty and loyalty to Osama bin Laden and declare himself a member of Al-Qaeda. That also is the key to creating a civil war, because the main thing that Zarqawi did was to kill Shiites and other Iranians. It was not targeting the U.S. at all. So this is the handiwork of McChrystal. When he was nominated, the New York Times said, is this a good choice? Isn't he pretty heavily implicated in torture and God knows what else? But he's Obama's hand-picked general. There's a secret report by McChrystal. Nobody knows how much he's demanding in terms of additional forces. Some say 40,000 more. Some say 60,000 more. Some say 80,000 more. So you would then get the U.S. invading force in Afghanistan up to 100,000, 120,000, 140,000. This war is absolutely hopeless because of the terrain, the size of the territory, and the nature of the population. It is the graveyard of empires. The British blundered in there in the 19th century. 3 Afghan wars, they lost all of them. The Soviet Union broke its sword against Afghanistan in the 1980s, thanks to also Brzezinski's role in making that happen. So the United States is now trudging along the path that leads to the collapse of empire. And Obama is leaning in that direction. During the time that he considered the McChrystal request, he was already sending 13,000 additional support troops into Afghanistan. This is important strategically because, again, Afghanistan is in the middle of Russia, China, India. If you want to have a rail line from India to Europe, let's say, it's got to go through the Khyber Pass, meaning Afghanistan. So it's a purely cynical geopolitical gambit, and the U.S. is running predator drone strikes in Pakistan that have no relation to terrorism. They attack peaceful civilian populations, villages, and wedding parties with the sole purpose of humiliating the central government in Islamabad and breaking and undermining the sovereignty of Pakistan. So that's the cynical imperialist racket that Obama is now in the middle of. If you get the Nobel Prize, you're supposed to be contributing to the decline of standing armies. Obama does the opposite. He ran on a platform of 100,000 more troops, and I'm sure we'll hear about that again. And if we look at the number of combat troops in the field, it's now 120,000 in Iraq and about 60 to 80,000 in Afghanistan. And if McChrystal gets what he wants, we will be approaching 200,000 and perhaps 250,000 combined total U.S. forces in the field, in war zones. That will be comparable to several earlier phases of the Vietnam War. Usury laws. Let's go back to a period when, before Volcker, you had a 10% limit on credit card interest rates that were set by the states. And we could do that again. You want to re-regulate financial markets so that it's impossible for Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley to drive up the price of oil to $150 a barrel the way they did in the summer of 2008. So with those types of measures, you've stopped speculation or discouraged it, and you've diminished this tremendous weight of zombie banks, because a lot of the zombie banks would be put through liquidation and their derivatives would simply be written off. Then you need to nationalize the Federal Reserve. You've got to get control of the process of creating credit. You've got to seize the Fed, nationalize it. It means that zombie bankers and cliques of unaccountable and unelected financiers no longer set policy for the entire United States. The size of the money supply, the interest rates, and who gets these loans is determined by public laws discussed and debated openly by Congress, signed by the President. That's all we have under our system. Once you have a national bank of the United States, you start issuing tranches of credit, $1 trillion at a time. The only trick you have to do is make sure it goes only for production, for farming, for manufacturing, industry, construction, mining, forestry, scientific research, retail sales, yes, got to get the goods to market. You've also got to put money into transportation, be it rail, freight, and things like this. If you make sure that it only goes into production, there is no inflation. As a matter of fact, commodities tend to get cheaper. The goal of this is to create 30 million productive jobs. Right now, the U.S. unemployment rate is officially 15 million. The best guess is that in reality, we would need 30 million productive jobs to approach full employment. So if you come forward, if you're an industrialist, if you want to take Detroit auto plants and get them going again, reconvert them and rehire the workers and manufacture something that people need, you get 0%. But if you're a banker, a speculator, financial services, sorry, you go take your chances in the free market that you admire so much. You've got credit being offered by the nationalized Fed. You got to stimulate lending. Lending and borrowing. So you've got lending from the Fed, you've got to find borrowers. Now the borrowers are hard to find because everybody's so frightened by the panic. So what you've got to do is to create great projects of infrastructure, and this is really the heart of the program. You've got to say that the money coming out of the Fed as 0% public credit goes into specific infrastructure projects that we know will increase the capital stock of the United States and increase the productivity of labor. The first thing you're going to need is 50,000 miles of the most modern maglev rail. Rebuild the entire collapsing transit systems, be it passenger, freight, commuter rail, with the most modern maglev technology, pioneered by Germany and now being used in Japan and China, but not here, even though the technology came out of the U.S. 1,000 hospitals with about 500 beds each. You want to have medical care? First thing you need is hospitals. We've lost 1,000. In the rural America and inner cities, hospitals are hard to find. People die from heart attacks because the hospital is too far away. Build 1,000 of the most modern hospitals and you will get up to what was considered the minimum rate in the Hill-Burton law of 1946. It said we should aim at 4.5 hospital beds per 1,000 population. Right now we're at 3.2, so we ought to build those hospital beds. We would need 100 nuclear reactors of the most modern type, fourth generation, high temperature, pebble bed reactors, 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts each, to maintain an electricity grid and to replace older reactors that are now becoming increasingly obsolete. You've got to rebuild the entire interstate highway system. It was a great thing under Eisenhower, the biggest road building project since the Romans, but it's now falling down. The Minneapolis Bridge over the Mississippi River, bridges in Connecticut and elsewhere. That has all got to be rebuilt. The other thing is water systems. Drinking water, sewage treatment, wastewater, canals, and irrigation. All of that has got to be rebuilt from the bottom up. So you put that together, 100 reactors, 1,000 hospitals, 50,000 miles of maglev, the interstates and the water systems. You have created millions and millions of high-paid jobs in creating capital goods and infrastructure of permanent value. This is not consumer goods. This stays with you and gives you a permanent advantage. The other thing you need is science drivers. Remember the NASA moonshot. It generated the spin-offs that gave you computer chips, and the whole computer-based economy came out of the space program. So let's do that again. Let's put $100 billion each, first into high-energy physics. Let's get into lasers. Let's get into thermonuclear fusion power and other advanced scientific applications. Second one is Moon, Mars exploration, colonization on a permanent basis, and industrial production. Do all this, obviously, together with other interested countries. But let's begin to go into space on a permanent basis and use that for economic benefits. The third one is biomedical research. You're talking about healthcare. The only way you can save costs and spend less money in healthcare, other than genocide, is to find cures. You want to save money on cancer? Don't deny people treatment. Find a cure. Cure it. Diabetes, heart disease, and all the other dread diseases can find cures. So begin to put money into that, and obviously make that an international program too. The fourth point is, while you're doing all this, you got to keep people alive. So you got to maintain your social safety net. Full funding at enhanced levels for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment benefits, food stamps, minimum wage, and all the rest. And you've got to think about health care in particular. Obama is interested in looting health care. The worst thing that Obama wants to do, in my view, is to cut $500 billion out of Medicare. And you've got to stop that. The only way you can save money is to find cures. The fifth point is world trade. The way out of a depression has to do with stimulating world trade and building it up. Right now, world trade is 1/3 below the level of 2008. So in the depression so far, we're down 33%, and that seems to be headed downwards again. So you've got to have an international monetary approach to this, set up a system with fixed parities, gold settlement, the yen, the euro, the dollar, the ruble, the Arabs, the Latin Americans. But the goal of this is not currency stability or anything to do with monetarism per se. It's to start high technology capital goods exports from those Detroit auto plants that you've reconverted and other facilities in the U.S. Start exporting hospitals. Build 1,000 hospitals for China. Build 1,000 hospitals for Russia. Then look at the great projects of world infrastructure that remain undone. Look at the Bering Strait Bridge Tunnel. Look at the one for Gibraltar, for the Straits of Sicily. Connect Japan to the Asian mainland. Do the Congo-Nile equivalent to the Tennessee Valley Authority. Do the same thing for the Amazon, the Orinoco, and the Rio de la Plata. Do it for the Ganges, Brahmaputra in Asia, and the Mekong as well. In other words, get the great projects of world infrastructure that have been on the drawing boards now for decades and do them. That means a Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Djibouti, maglev. Essentially unite all the land areas of the world using maglev rail. So you could deliver a package from any point in the world to any other point within approximately 48 hours on a railroad platform. And use that then to prepare a further advance. But you'd end the depression. You want to do that you will create 30 million new, highly paid industrial jobs, productive jobs,